that Barak has been able to help with in terms of encryption. So without further ado, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. And the first topic we're going to talk about is the truth about encryption. So we've been using encryption for years. It's mandated by compliance regulations, and we're prohibited from unencrypting traffic. So with all these standards, why are we now questioning if encryption is a good thing?
Go ahead, Ben.
Who wants to take this one, guys?
Okay. So I was on mute there. So we're questioning whether or not encryption is a good thing because it is an essential tool. It is an essential defense for any legitimate user, any legitimate organization, legitimate governments, legitimate bodies. Any legitimate use requires encryption in today's environment to secure their traffic, to secure their data, and to make sure that their assets aren't lost, abused, or changed. The reason we're questioning it is because as more and more encryption is added, encryption is now up to about 95% of all communications are encrypted, it's becoming a challenge now for security providers, for systems admins, even for software developers and IT professionals to diagnose and find out what's in that encrypted traffic. If, for example, encryption is being used negatively, well, how do we know? If that encrypted packet contains an exploit, how do we know? And that's really what we want to talk about. We're questioning whether it's a good thing, and fundamentally, encryption is a good thing. I mean, everything's from a perspective, and from the perspective of users, it's essential. And the way I like to think of encryption and the internet is a bit like the postal system. It used to be at the dawn of the internet, we were all sending postcards. And it was easy for someone to grab a postcard, read what's on it, send it on, change it, and there was really no protection in place. But as we've developed and started to encrypt things, well, now we have everyone using envelopes, and it's not possible to look inside every piece of post anymore. And that's how I like to think of it in my head. It just gives me a good picture for what we're talking about. And it's very difficult now to tell with the postal service if what's being transmitted is good or bad. But from our perspective, going right back to the dawn of communications before the internet, encryption did exist. But it's been a rocky road for computers, specifically since the start of the internet, and how we've implemented this, how people have used it, how it's protected us. But now we're seeing more and more how it's being abused. So really, if you consider back to the first messages that were sent on the internet, they were probably things like, hello Bob, hello Jim, hello world, all very simple stuff. And there wasn't really much value in the data there. Now, as things developed, that became a major scientific and research platform. So people would start to send valuable research data, academic data on that. And what also happened simultaneously is the number of users started to increase exponentially. Way back at the beginning, when you have a closed system, you trust everyone, you don't really need to protect your data. But as the system becomes ubiquitous, as the number of users increases exponentially, you've now got more users than you can trust, and you've got a system that's too large for you to secure with a moat or a fence around it. So what we have now is the likes of banking transactions, corporate information, government data, even as far as defense information being sent. And it is absolutely critical that we defend that properly using encryption techniques. It's the only way to really ensure and secure our data in an open communications avenue. Now, that said, while it is ubiquitous, these defenses are being attacked by our adversaries. Malicious actors are constantly upping their game. They're improving their skills and techniques to attack the good work that encryption does. And we need to be on top of that with new versions of encryption, with new standards. And that's what we'll talk about later on with TLS version 1.2 and 1.3 and why that's a challenge. But as well as that, attackers aren't just attacking our defenses, they're building defenses of their own. And that's really what I think Omar is going to speak about, which is where the attacker is using the defense of encryption to prevent us taking them down and finding out what they're doing. I think that covers it, and I think I'm handing over to Omar now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think that TLS and encryption has been created. It's an amazing creation. So everyone that's created encryption to be able to encrypt everything, to be able to make information safe. But it's also every good thing has a bad thing. So if the hackers, the bad people are also using the same technology to hide. That was the case for Enigma, for example. So Enigma has been created to encrypt communication, but then the German use it to hide their communication and not being detected what's going on and what they do. It's exactly the same now in our digital world. So the hackers are usually using that same technologies, the same encryption technology to hide from being detected. And that's growing insanely fast. So 80% now, as encryption is growing, as people now working from home or people connecting to the cloud, to the data center, to the different infrastructure, encryption has been everywhere. So now 80% of the traffic is encrypted. What do we do with that? What can we do with that? What can we see with that? Hackers are also smart, so they see that. They use that as well to be able to hide from being detected, or to be able to not get any thing that you can see on their network that where they use encryption. So I give you an example. Last year in 2019, the top 4 malware or cyber attacks that happens and command and control that was doing, that happened on encrypted traffic and using TLS to hide. The top 4 attacks, so Ryuka, Sudonoki, Emotet, all of those were using the same encryption technology to hide. So that's now become a good, but also a bad thing as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Omar. So this is a perfect transition into encryption abuse. So people, a lot of people think that encryption is a good thing. Do you guys want to talk about, the positive and the negatives? Ben, I'll open this up to you. Do you want to talk about why it might be a good thing?
Well, in terms of encryption, definitely we've covered that it is a good thing. It's essential. It's critical to the future of the internet, and it's critical for so many reasons. Now, an easy reason is to think, well, someone can steal my financial transactions, so you definitely need to protect those. And going back to the dawn of the commercial internet, that was definitely one of the forefront things that was looked at. How do we protect banking data? How do we protect personal transactions? But as time has moved on, it's more important now because even our personal data, like our zip codes, our national insurance numbers, or our I think social security numbers, all of that data, critical personal data, is now also of interest to attackers if they want to clone our identities, take out loans on our behalf. Obviously, we're not getting the benefit of those, but they are, and it's our close personal data. But even more than that now, if you look at our browsing habits, if you look at the websites we go to, if you look at Facebook, if you look at LinkedIn, if you look at all of those pieces of traffic as well, that's also of interest to attackers. Attackers are developing their tools. They're using machine learning in the same way as the security and legitimate industries are using it, but they're using it to profile the people they're targeting. You'll have heard of mass information campaigns and disinformation campaigns. These are based upon understanding user behavior, understanding profiles. So that really has brought into the forefront not just the value of encrypting banking type commercial data, but also encrypting everything we do, because anything that can be watched or anything that can be farmed becomes a vulnerability to us. And for that reason, we need to use end-to-end encryption to protect everything we do. Now, to answer sort of the question on the slide, and does it allow malicious actors to hide? Absolutely. This is a defense for us, but it's not just restricted to legitimate means. It's also a defense for malicious actors. So in that situation, for example, if a person has installed malware on your system, and the malware used to communicate back to their master server to find its instructions, to find out what it has to do, and it used to do it across an unencrypted communications channel. Well, as security professionals, we can watch for that traffic, we can see it, and then we can say, oh, hang on, that's malware. We know that's malware, it's talking back to get instructions, and thus we can alert the users, alert the systems, and then go and clean it. But if you encrypt that traffic, well, it's not very difficult to tell what's inside it. So whereas before, for example, Metasploit's shell called Interpreter used to be easy because you could just detect the command codes going back and forth. But now you can't, because it obfuscates it, it encrypts it in sorts using a relatively easy to break hash. But that's an example tool. If you take it into the commercial malware market, these are now using more and more advanced encryption that we cannot break as easily, if at all. And that's really where it comes into how it's abused. people will use it so that the command and control channels are protected, so that the attacks themselves are encrypted. And when we can't look inside those, we can't tell it's an attack, and we can't use traditional security mechanisms to protect you. Even down as far as if you've ever been ransomware, then there's a situation coming where you have keys which have been mandated that you must use. And those keys are the ones which have encrypted all of your data, encrypted all of the things on your computer. But you might ask yourself the question of, well, how do the attackers get them? And the way they get them is by getting them sent to them via the internet. So if you encrypt those keys as they're being transmitted, again, we can't detect those kinds of communications, and we can't tell you that you're being attacked by ransomware. So I think handing over to Omar now on
let me add let me add a couple of things to what Ben have been saying. One of the things is that encryption is also two things that I want to add. One is exactly the example that Ben mentioned around being able to see what's going on within encrypted traffic, or being able to detect what's going on there. So we see trends moving and evolving for the last couple of years. So one is, with all that customers or all our testers or all our people that we work with, they will all have spyware activity that they've never seen before. So spyware to be able to see what you're writing, keyloggers, things like that. Even if though it's not to attack you, or it's not to show you added value. It's more like to spy on you, to say what you're writing, what you're looking at, what you're doing at your home. So all of those things that are using for marketing purposes or to get information from you. So that's something that we see on every network of organizations that we work with. The second thing is, we see a lot of advanced attacks that are using encryption to hide, but they're also using advanced techniques to hide. So I give you an example. We've seen attacks where it was a connection to Twitter, to a Twitter picture. So the command and control was talking to a Twitter picture, and then the Twitter picture was talking to the server itself, or to the affected server. So the command and control doesn't have to talk to the to the server itself. He talks to the Twitter picture, and then the Twitter picture will talk to the command. As an organization, you will see a Twitter, you will see something normal. You see Twitter talk to things going on. You can see, for you it's legitimate, but once you open it, or once you check it, you will see that this is a malware, or this is a malware activity is going on. But as an organization, to see that, it wasn't easy, but there were ways around it. So like decrypting, analyzing, then re-encrypt it again. But the problem is that as encryption becomes huge, it grows from everywhere, mobile, IoT, web, traffic, SSH, all of that, you cannot do that at a large scale, because it becomes very costly, becomes very, very, you need very powerful hardware, you need to sample, it hits your traffic. So there are new techniques coming in, like now, like the metadata analysis, to be able to spot what's going on and to be able to detect those malicious actors that are hiding inside encrypted traffic.
Awesome. So you guys, if we're mandated to use encryption, how do we tell if it's being abused or not?
Well, let me give you an example, right? An easy to understand example. It's like you're going to an airport, right? So exactly when boarding your flight, there are thousands of people boarding their flights. So the customs, it's like your luggage, right? Your custom doesn't have to open your luggage at each of your luggage to see what's going on inside. So they have to check all the metadata around it. So who you are, the size of your luggage, the X-ray, where you're coming from, all of those information, what's your historic, blah, blah, blah. So all of those historic, or all those metadata that they combine all together to be able to say, okay, I see Ben's luggage is not normal, so I need to check it. I need to open it and check it, or something like that. So all of that makes all of those metadata, that are used smartly, can give you huge indicators about what's going on within encrypted traffic.
I absolutely love that example, Omar. Thank you so much. All right, so let's dive a little.
Just to I can see that you have some Q&A and questions, Stefan. Yes, I have it. So once we finish, we will answer to all those questions later. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, all right, Omar, question for you. So, how do you help organizations catch malicious encrypted traffic?
We work a lot, as I mentioned, the airport example, we work a lot on the metadata related to the traffic. So the metadata can show you amazing thing about what's going on within your infrastructure or within the malware that is being used. So the malware, for example, we look at those information and we combine them to see if there is any abnormality or anything that we've seen as suspicious before, or the models or the artificial intelligence learned to see before. So that's exactly like what people done for Enigma, or they broke the code for Enigma. So they've seen patterns. They developed those patterns to be able to use machine learning. At the time, it was like huge machines to do that, to perform mathematics. So exactly, we do the same and be able to understand, does it look like a pattern that we've seen? Does it look like a normal pattern? Does it look something abnormal? And then be able to categorize all those and detect if it's something wrong or something good going on within that encrypted traffic. And the great thing is that there are two things that allow to do that. So one is big data. So you have huge volume of data. You can analyze them, and you can create advanced model to do that. So that makes a lot of sense, but it also becomes very powerful in terms of accuracy and being able to detect advanced patterns and models. So now in the last year, we've seen powerful machines that can generate hugely advanced models. And that's how we be able to correlate all those metadata information to be able to spot what's going on.
Awesome. And Omar, you were telling me a story about a real life case study. It was a bank in South Africa, I believe.
Yeah, there was a bank in Africa. So we've seen some abnormal data, we've seen some abnormal activity on their encrypted traffic. So we've seen that, for example, the certificate doesn't look normal, the bytes distribution wasn't right, that we've seen before. It was a Swift traffic, so we knew what the transactions looks like. We've seen that some of the information within the DNS doesn't look normal, or within the certificate, within the information that they've been sending. So all of those combined together raised some flags around abnormality. We went to check and we found out that it was an illegal transaction. So there was hackers. It was in a rogue country, North Korea, that hacked into the system, and then they tried to send malicious transactions, small malicious transactions into their into banks in Eastern Europe, and then used encryption traffic to hide, because for them it looks normal, it looks like a legitimate, it looks like an encrypted traffic going outside. So all of those metadata helped us see what's going on.
Yeah, and all those small transactions add up to a very large transaction. So let's dive into TLS 1.3 versus TLS 1.2. Ben, I'll turn it over to you, and we're going to go ahead and move into some diagrams that Ben created to explain the difference. But Ben, you want to take this opportunity, or do you want to just dive into the diagrams?
No, well, firstly, I need to apologize for the diagrams, and thank you for throwing me in front of a bus on those, Joe.
I created them.
No.
I love your diagram, my friend.
I'm not an artist. I hope that gives me some credentials in the security industry, but no, I don't do art. So we're going to move on to some diagrams in a moment, but straight up to talk about TLS version 1.3 versus 1.2. We have a very wide range of technical knowledge and capability on the call, so I'm going to keep this at a relatively high level, but I am happy to talk later in more technical depth. And I would have loved to have talked about the mathematics of this, but the practical reality is what's more important. So going way back to the dawn of encryption, and Joe, if you want to show us the next slide. Going way back to the dawn of encryption, it's a pretty simple system, and I like to think of it like a lockbox. And it's a lockbox which you put a padlock on, that's it. On the left-hand side, you have your client, and the client has some data. They add a padlock to it, to which they have the key. And now the contents of the box is unknown. It's encrypted. You send the padlock plus the box across the internet, and in traditional security, you'll have an intrusion detection system, which will try and examine that and then pass it on to the server. Now, the downside of this system is that everyone who wants to open that traffic needs to have the key. So in the second row, you see the key also has to be transmitted somehow. And that allows the IDS, the intrusion detection system, to open your data, look at it and say, yes, that is safe, therefore I shall pass it on and I won't create an alert. Or no, it's not safe, I'm going to block that, or I'm going to create an alert about that to let someone go and look at it. But either way, the risk here is that the key is always vulnerable, and it doesn't matter what system you put in place, what obfuscation you put, the key must be transmitted somehow. And while there are certain extremely paranoid systems which require physical handover of keys, physically speaking, handing over a CD or a USB key with an encryption key on it, unless you're in a system like that, you can't protect that key in the same way as you can in TLS 1.3. So this is a simple example of what happens right now. And the key is the vulnerability. So if we move on to effectively what TLS 1.3 does, and again, please apologies for the quality of my terrible drawings, but if we start at the top on the left, you have a client. The client has some data. This time they're going to put a blue padlock onto the data to again encrypt it. And now it's a question mark. We don't know what's in it, but they have the blue key. They send the locked box with the padlock across the internet. They don't send the key. The IDS, the intrusion detection system, it gets it, but it has no key, so can't look at it. Only choice it can do is to pass it on to the server. The server has it, but the server still doesn't have a blue key, so there's nothing it can do. But what it can do in this situation, it can't decrypt it, but it can put another padlock on it. So it puts on a purple padlock, and the server now has a purple key. And then it sends the encrypted box back, this time with two padlocks, a blue padlock and a purple padlock. The unsecured data is never transmitted, but the client gets back this locked box. It's got its blue key and it's got a purple padlock. So it obviously can't do anything with a purple padlock, but it can take off its own lock. So it takes off the blue padlock, leaving the client with an encrypted piece of data that is encrypted with a key that it does not have. It then transmits that back across. Yet again, the IDS is unable to inspect, and then it arrives at the server. But the server is the thing that put on the purple padlock. It has the purple key, so it can remove the second padlock and decrypt the data. Now, using this model means that at no point are the keys ever required to be shared. And that's a very, very difficult thing for the security industry to deal with, because in traditional IDS models, the keys which encrypted your traffic would be shared with your security appliance. It would be able to look inside those envelopes and it could tell whether or not they were malicious or whether or not they were safe and benign. But now with TLS 1.3, we can't look inside anymore. You can't share the keys. These keys are generated every single time a new connection is created. And that's happening hundreds of thousands of times a second on large web servers. It's not possible to get the keys out. And that is what really blinds IDS systems, traditional IDS systems going into the future. And that is the real challenge. So again, happy to talk deeper about the maths of TLS 1.3, but at a high level, this is how it operates. And you can imagine this. I mean, that's why I like this example. I think I drew this diagram originally for a classroom full of 5-year-olds. It's designed to be simple to understand, and it's because it is that simple. If you imagine you and a friend with a lockbox and 2 padlocks, you can try this at home, and it's simple, but it works. And that's where the real challenge comes in. So, Joe, hopefully I've explained that. And Omar, if you have anything else to add, please do.
Nothing to add, my friend. You explained it very, very good.
All right. So, Omar, I'll open the floor to you. Omar, as you folks know, is the CEO and founder of Barak.io. Omar, do you want to talk a little bit about how Barak can help organizations better protect their data?
Yes, so I will be brief. So what we do is we do encrypted traffic visibility. So we help organizations detect threats and malware on encrypted traffic without decrypting the traffic. That helps organizations in one, encryption visibility. So it gives you visibility around what's going on in your encrypted traffic, if you have anything wrong going on, if you have any attacks or malware or abnormal activity, using the metadata to ensure the privacy of the information. So even your internal users or external users will keep their data private, financials data, any data that they have that could be private. We're highly effective compared to decryption. So now, as I mentioned, the only way to do it now is to decrypt, analyze, then re-encrypt it again. As Ben explained, the problem is that as encryption grows, it costs a lot of money in hardware, software, latency on your network, and managing the certificates. So with us, you don't decrypt, so you save around 70% of cost based on compared to decryption solutions. We also help you on compliance. So we do a lot of compliance around decryption to detect any weak encryption going on, to detect any virtual machine that's been popped up by the development team, and then with a weak encryption, and then they forget it out there, on the wild, or connecting to the internet or on the data center. So we help you on those compliance piece to detect any weak encryption or any non-compliant cryptography, and help you audit that, or detect that in real time. We also help your team save your time, and then with the help of Sigil as well, by reducing the number of false positive and the high accuracy of the attack. So really focus on the problems that you have. And then you can stop it in real time. We help you in real-time remediation. You could stop it in real time. You can interact. You can do whatever you want, or we can alert you in real time so you can check what's going on or stop it. We also compliant with TLS 1.3, as Ben mentioned, because we don't decrypt. So we're able to see what's going on with encrypted traffic on TLS 1.3 without decryption.
Omar, thank you so much. And folks, if you guys would like to explore Barak a little further, you can send myself an email or reach out to Omar directly. Ben, let's pass it over to you. Let's talk a little bit about Sigil and how we're helping folks today.
Sure. So Sigilant is security as a service. That's what we provide, whether that be the core of your cybersecurity posture, or whether that be an enhancement or a supporting aspect to your existing team. Our service caters to both. So we have two key elements to this cybersecurity service. The first of which is a dedicated cybersecurity advisor program, where everybody gets allocated their personal known contact, the friendly face. But these are people who are cybersecurity experts. They're not just limited to the alerts or the monitoring we're providing. They can help you with anything else in your network. If you're planning on expanding, if you're planning on adding new services, if you're not sure about the latest vulnerabilities, whether or not they apply to you, they're really just there almost as a dip-in technical expert as and when you need them. And these guys then are backed up by our Security Operations Center, which runs 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's the core part of our security monitoring service. So as everyone I'm sure is aware, for compliance purposes with many different standards, you have to review your security logs, you have to review your systems, you have to keep a watch on them. And that's quite difficult to do, particularly in the small, medium enterprise environment, where to stand up a 24/7 security operations center is a significant cost investment, particularly given the fact that if security does their job right, there shouldn't really be much to see. It really becomes more of a maintenance effort. And in that situation, it's difficult to justify that cost whenever you have so many other things pulling at purse strings. So what we do is we provide that dedicated service of the cybersecurity advisor, coupled with our 24/7 monitoring, which is tailored to just what you need it for. Be it small business, where we're covering everything, or be it in a large enterprise where you're just looking for someone to take the reins overnight to give your guys a break, or over the weekends or over holiday periods, and sort of build that out. So as part of that, we've got our managed detection and response service. And what that effectively means is when we see things on your network that shouldn't be there, and we believe they are an active threat, we'll pick up the phone and we'll tell you. So if we think you've just been breached, we'll call you. And this happens relatively frequently. Where organizations will be breached for a variety of different reasons, be they security posture problems, be they hardware faults, be they something that someone's found to exploit software in your network. So we will watch for all of those. We'll tell you when we see them, and we'll tailor it to whatever it is you need. We'll watch the servers, the systems which you think are highest criticality. And coming along with that, we have a single platform which allows you to see what's going on in your environment. You can look through and say, oh, okay, Sigilant has reviewed 250 alerts this week. And of those alerts, I see they're split down into 60% are unusual logins and 40% were other security related messages from my appliances. Oh, I see one of them was a critical potential breach. What happened with that? And then you can follow the trail right the way through as we interface with your teams and with your internal IT assets to really resolve those problems and respond to the threats that are happening. Aside that, we've also got vulnerability and patch management. So that's more of a proactive service where we can help you understand what assets you have in your environment, what vulnerabilities you're exposed to because of those assets, and what you can do about patching them. And that pushes as far as proactive patching through the service. And then finally, Omar touched briefly on compliance. We likewise look at compliance and reporting. So in the concept where you're being audited, Your cybersecurity advisor is there with you alongside. They can speak to the technical aspect where you need them to. And we also then provide scorecards, we provide reports, and we're able to give that in an automated way that shows your cybersecurity posture is vigilant and is 24/7 as required. Joe, I think that covers it, but anything else, feel free to jump in.
Ben, thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, you know, there's organizations out there like Sigil and Barak that are here to help you along your cybersecurity journey. So don't feel like you have to walk that cybersecurity journey alone. We are here for you. And let's move along. We have a special guest with us today, our CRO, Mr. Jim Fairweather. And we put together a package that Jim is going to talk about for you folks out there to take advantage of, you know, during these times. So Jim, without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay, Joe?
Loud and clear, Jim. Yep.
Okay, great. So appreciate everyone joining us this morning. As Joe mentioned, there are a couple of things that we'd like to offer you. We understand that everyone is going through some very difficult times right now, as are we. So what we want to do as your trusted advisor to help you and to assist you during these times is to actually put a couple of very compelling offers on the table. First being a POC, proof of concept offer for 14 days for free. So that's something that you can sign up for on our website and try a 14-day POC for both the Barak and the Sigilant product and service offerings. And secondly, again, due to the times that we're in, a lot of people have issues with acquiring assets, acquiring products, anything like that. And typically through a SaaS management and procurement system that we offer, we traditionally offer 1 or 3 or extended contracts. Because of our current situation, we have reduced that to 90-day contracts that are renewable every 90 days. So again, because of the vulnerability of your company, if you will, or certainly of your network, but till everything gets back to normal, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to protect yourself and to acquire our technology and services. So if you're interested in that, again, you can look on our website or just respond back to Joe or anyone else on this call, and we will contact you immediately to give you a little bit more information on that.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, folks, following the webinar, there will be a series of communications that will go out. You all will receive a copy of the recording of the webinar, as well as a compelling sheet that talks to the power of the combination of Sigil and Barak, as well as we'll point you folks to the link to sign up for the test drive. So that will be the complimentary 14-day POC, as well as the opportunity to take advantage of our quarterly payments. So in closing, I would just like to thank you, Omar, Ben, and Jim, for joining us today. It was a pleasure. Everyone in the audience, thank you guys so much.
Can I take 1 minute from your time, Joe?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I have a question here saying encrypted malware still must be encrypted before it can perform a legal or legitimate purpose. Can this be prevented by recognizing the originating IP address as a source of the malware? No, it cannot. Because of the cloud usage, what we've seen right now is we've seen a lot of surge and peak into command and control and malware activity using IP addresses that are not blacklisted, that have been switched their IP addresses, they've never seen them before, IP addresses that takes you to Amazon, AWS, or Azure, or any other website where you can acquire IP addresses. So IP address blacklisting for those type of attacks, or for those type of, especially with Ryuga, for example, that is hitting a lot in the US right now. It's a very nasty malware from the Russians, encrypting ransomware using encrypted traffic. The IP address changes all the time. So being able to keep up with that is mainly impossible. So you rather look at the traffic itself, not at the IP addresses, to be able to spot what's going on.
If I,
Thank
if I
you.
We have another. That's for you, Ben. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, thank you for, I know it's a question too. So just for the participants, you can submit questions on the Q&A button on the Zoom platform, or you can just talk to them, ask them verbally on the call. But so why don't you go ahead, because it looks like we have another question in the Q&A box on Zoom.
For you, Ben, you go for it. You're the slide guy.
If I can add just a little bit to that answer to Stephen's question. So Stephen had asked, can we not just look for the IPs? And as you said, Omar, no, we can't. Now, I think back a couple of years, and I remember the first time I was really surprised whenever I saw malware using different methods to communicate. I saw it using Snapchat. I saw it using Twitter. I saw it using Instagram. And that was really interesting because we could then start to tell, this is honest, we could tell the age of the person who wrote the malware based on what platform they were using to communicate. Any of the more seasoned malware authors would typically use things like IRC or Usenet to communicate. And any of the newer, excuse the term, script kiddies, or people who typically were just in it just to try their skills out, that sort of stuff they were writing all used all of the new techniques. And I thought it was really interesting that the command and control channels were aligned to the social media, which the authors tended to use. But coming back to your core question, older malware. Malware is not one thing. Obviously, we know that. And there's so many different types. There's absolutely some malware that, yes, there are known servers that it uses for command and control. But in today's environment, because particularly in the AWS market, where you can spin up and shut down boxes so quickly, particularly in the fact where you've got these intermediate platforms like Usenet or like Twitter or even Discord now, using any of those an intermediary, any malware that's any good, and not all of it is, but any malware that's any good will use those channels. And what are your options there? If you ever see a Twitter message, now, firstly, you might see one of your hosts communicate with Twitter, but how do you know that's not your employee telling people what they had for lunch that day? Because you can't actually look inside the traffic. And that's a really good question because it highlights the value of the Barak system, because you will see things to and from Twitter and you can't look inside the encrypted traffic. But what you can do is you can examine the metadata and you can look at the patterns around it and you go, oh, hold on, why is John telling people what he had for lunch at 3 o'clock in the morning? John's not even here at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's an anomaly. And that's the sort of things that Barak's system will pull out. It'll say, look, you've got an unusual communication here. That's something someone needs to go and look at. And then that's where Sigil comes in. We'll see that at 3 o'clock in the morning. We'll go and investigate it. We might even go as far as actually going to that Twitter page and saying, well, hang on, why has a random user at 3 o'clock in the morning posted a QR code? We then decode the QR code. We might find, oh, hang on, that includes command and control information for known malware. And that's not a hypothetical, that's a real world story. We have done this. So it's a really good story around that. So thank you for the question. I'm going to take the next question if that's all right, Omar, unless you want to jump in. So will TLS 1.3 become mandatory soon? If I drop the word soon, it will become mandatory. It will become mandatory for an awful lot of standards. I've seen in some of the PCI compliance standards and some of the SOC standards, it has already become mandatory in those, but it's mandatory in the same way as, respectfully, IPv6 was definitely going to be mandatory within a couple of years, and we're 20 years on now and still waiting for it to be finally put in place. There will always be systems.
Sorry, it will also be driven by Google, by Facebook, by all those big players that now implementing 1.3, and you will have 1.3 traffic anywhere in your network. So.
Yeah, the minute they start, I mean, it's the big tech giants that really dictate policy, respectfully, of organizations and governments. When they start, it'll trickle from there. Whenever it gets to a stage where the default installation of Apache or Nginx or any of those requires, or by default, the virtual machines you download to actually spin up your boxes, whenever they come with it enabled by default, well, that's when it'll start to be default everywhere. Now, up until that point, the only thing that's really going to impact it is many of these things, it's the financial aspect. And Google at the minute page ranks in part based on the security and trust in the site. So if your site is using the latest techniques, the latest security measures, well, in that case, Google will actually uprank it more. If it's suspect, if it's using less secure methods, then it'll get downranked. And as businesses start to catch on to that and realize, oh, hang on, so I can increase my Google search ranking just by increasing my security. let's increase security. That's the real drivers behind this, and Omar's hit it in the head. Google, Facebook, Instagram, all of those guys are the ones that will drive this. And there's a third question here from an anonymous attendee.
Yes, there's a question
Mark,
for
that's yours.
me. So what level in the network layer are you getting metadata from? So we're getting the metadata from the layer 2. So everything related to the handshake, everything related to the TCP IP headers that are not encrypted. So basically, once a handshake is done between a client and a server, we collect all the metadata related to the handshake. So the hello client, this is the client, this is the server. So the hello client, then the hello server, then the certificate exchange, the key exchange, all of those metadata. And then we take also some, what we call TCP IP initial packets. So the headers of the initial packets, we put them all together to rebuild the session or rebuild the traffic between the client and the server. And then while rebuilding that traffic, we calculate more than 200 indicators around time to respond, how did it respond, intertiming, bytes distribution, ciphers distribution. So all of those that we use for the machine learning and behavior analytics models. The detection is under a second. So between we do a span or a port mirroring, we put it into a collector, then between the collector, sending the data to the platform, and then getting a score, what you call a risk score that goes from 0 to 1, we have under a second.
Awesome. Omar, thank you so much. Ben, thank you so much. And Jim, thank you. Folks, we'll hang out for a minute, see if you got any other questions coming in. But if not, you're always welcome to reach out to us via our website, email, social, the various other channels. Looks like that might be a wrap, you guys. So again, everyone in the audience, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Be sure to subscribe to Sigilant to stay on top of future events. And we look forward to the next webinar to present to you folks. Again, please remember to take advantage of, these exciting opportunities in these trying times. And remember that we are here to help you folks along your cybersecurity journey. So again, thank you, my panelists. Thank you guys so much. And we'll let you guys get back to your day. I hope you enjoy it and be safe.
Thank you very much. Be safe and stay home. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.